think so. So we actually don't have a report back from closed session. So we'll move right to our one action item. And I'll turn it over to you both, Dr. Stevens, Dr. Sinclair.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to come together in this special meeting, and thank you, board members, for agreeing to meet this today. One of the categories of COVID money that the district has received is called the Extended Learning Opportunities Grant. We call it ELO. It is the most restrictive of the funding sources that's made available to us through the state and federal governments. We have tried as best we can to load items into the Extended Learning Opportunity Grant that are both necessary and that meet those qualifications. There's a timeline on the expenditures of ELO monies that is both backwards facing, that can support some of the expenses that we incurred earlier in the pandemic, and it is also forward facing, that can support expenses that we're anticipating this coming year. Because of a technicality, we're meeting today to be sure that we do pass this plan by the state's deadline. That's on or before June 1st. Do know as we sort of present this plan to you that there will be categories of expenditures listed here that are subject to revision. And that as we go deeper into the expenses of the listed in this plan, that we'll have the opportunity to come back to the board to do reporting on these expense categories and to make changes if they're necessary. So I'm going to turn it over to Director Michelle Sinclair. She's the Director of State and Federal Projects, who has been most closely involved in creating this plan and in studying the various regulations associated with these categories. We have a very brief presentation. It's only 4 slides. And then accompanying this presentation was the plan that will be submitted to the state. That's the text version of this plan. We will not be submitting the spreadsheet version of these expenses, the itemized expenses, to the state. So they only get the text version. The itemized expenses was for the benefit of transparency, both for the board and for members of the public. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Director Sinclair. She'll walk us through a brief presentation, and we welcome questions.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I'm going to start with just that brief slide deck. Let me share that. Oops. Okay. So the ELO is Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant. It's one of about 9 of the funds that we're receiving from both state and federal. So this is just a little bit, it's under the umbrella of AB or Assembly Bill or Senate Bill 86. And some of the highlights is that we're going to receive about $6.6 million. They have to be spent by August of 2022. So it's a pretty brief period. The intention is to support learning recovery. There's a couple subsections of it, and one of them is that we must spend $1,000 per homeless student enrolled, which amounts to about $221,000 for us. This is just the appointment, how we're going to get the money in May and in August, and then it is for supplemental instruction, and this is an important piece to it. It must supplement anything that we're planning to do prior. And also we have to submit what's called a learning recovery plan. So I shared with you a few documents. The learning recovery plan is in the form of a template. It looks similar to the LCAP. So these are those rules I just went over. We also, $1,000 per homeless student. We also must expend at least 85% for in-person services. And then also we must use at least 10% to hire paraprofessionals. So what that means is paraprofessionals can include instructional assistants as we know them, but also cooking and gardening, any paraprofessional position, what we call instructional specialists, also after school staff. It also requires stakeholder feedback. So I took this plan to principals and administrators, ran it by PAC and DLAC, the Learns and Bears staff, took it to their staff meeting, and then also EAC, where we invited any teacher or other staff member who wanted to come to that. and collected feedback from all those groups. These are the categories for the grant, and the proposal goes deeper into what we are planning on spending for each of the categories. However, this is just the amount of money we're putting into each of those buckets. And this is just a link to the Elo Grant Plan. So I'll show you, that's what I was referring to. It looks like this, and it is, yeah, it looks like a LCAP template. It's similar. It has a plan description, and then not as long as the LCAP, luckily. And then that's our expenditure plan with each of those pots of money and how much we're planning on spending on that. And then this is a more detailed proposal. They are proposed expenditures, like we said. That's how we determined what would fit into each of those spending buckets. So that's what you're seeing here. Everything in the light yellow is for summer school, because a lot of this money should be geared towards summer school and after school. So we added some new ideas for after school. We put the 7th day middle school here, and you can look into this. This goes on for pages, but it's a more detailed list of the expenditures. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Director Sinclair. And I know that all of this, all this funding and all the different restrictions is coming at us all sort of fast and furious, and it's a ton of work to get all this together and to get it in time to be approved just under the wire by the deadline tonight. And that my understanding is that, as you said, some of this will, or as Dr. Stevens said, some of this will come back to the board, or can come back to the board for either revisions or different specific investments, but that the broad categories are in the plan that we need to approve to make sure that we get the funding. Is that basically right?
Yeah, by June 1st. And then what happens is that we have 5 days to turn it in to the state. And then we have reporting periods where we have to report back on how we use the money. And they are going to hold us accountable for using 10% towards paraprofessionals and the $221,000 towards homeless youth.
Okay. All right. Let me see.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Who is that? Is that Director Babbitt?
Yes. Sorry, my doorbell is ringing. Do you have, is any of this similar to LCAP, where it's supposed to be new or expanded services, or is it okay for it to be things that we normally did or would have done?
It's to supplement our instruction. So it's really tricky on how we categorize that. But we, for example, we did a lot of moving of funding from one source to another. And the reason for that is because it fell into this fund. So like the bubble groups that we ran earlier in the year, those actually qualify for this funding, and they are above what we would normally do. So everything you see in there should be beyond what we would normally do. Except summer school, you might say, well, summer school we always do, and that's true, except summer school is considered supplemental because it's outside of the instructional day. So both are true. Supplementing what we would normally do during this instruction day, and then anything outside of the instructional day.
Okay, and one follow-up question. Are we going to be able to offer summer school to more pupils than we normally have? Is that our current plan in this plan?
It is our intention, and we do have more students who are signing up. One of our problems is, of course, staffing. So we're hoping to have enough staff to be able to offer summer school to more students. But we're also increasing, we're using more after school programs. We're going to have our own after summer school, I should say. Right. So after summer school, we're going to be providing our own staff some enrichment programs. And then also we're going to use EDMO, STEM Steps, and there's a Science for Girls and another Try It Trek that we're going to use.
Thanks, Director Babbitt. Director Sinai, and then Director Wasidep.
Thank you. And Director Sinclair, I really want to appreciate you for cranking out cranking out, that makes it sound like you're just churning them, but doing all the work you need to do for all these plans and reports that, the state is demanding that we do at the same time we're doing our budget and trying to, deal with school ending. So thank you for all your work on this. I do have a couple of questions, and I'm glad to know what the yellow meant, because I was a little unclear in the spreadsheet. And I'm looking at it, and when the funds are supposed to be used for some, it looks like a small percent is in yellow of the overall $6 million. So I too am kind of interested in what we're doing around expanding. I mean, I've heard a lot about the programming for the summer school. We've gotten a couple of emails about the lack of summer school for Berkeley High kids, particularly 9th and 10th graders. So if you could clarify whether there's any options for summer school around learning loss for Berkeley High students. And then there was a question in public comment about the leveraging or the, ensuring that we're not double dipping, in the sense that, are we paying for one program out of 2 accounts, or did you move things? So could you talk a little bit about how you see the interconnectedness between the LCAP and the ELO, so that we know that we are using our funds, we're maximizing the funds to the greatest potential, right?
Yeah, and it's been tricky, honestly. That's why we did some moving of funds, because the ESSER is much less restricted. And so if we were to buy, spend money on, say, we needed a PPE, that would be better used in ESSER. So we did a lot of thinking around this, and I worked a lot with our senior budget analyst, and we did pull money around. One thing I'll add about summer school is we found that we had a lot of carryover from Title I that we were able to use towards some of our summer school programs, so that we didn't have to use all the ELO money. So our summer school is costing more than you see in this budget. It just was put to different places. So we're trying to first use funds that will expire. Clearly we want to get those used up, and then using this money for the rest. But we tried to put in here the funding that qualified for this, because, so I don't know if that answers your question, but anything from the ESSERs are best to put in, that could be pulled from ESSER, were best to be put in here, so that gave us more flexibility and a longer timeline, because some of the funds have much longer timelines.
So maybe like to clarify,
Sure.
the bridge program is in here at 110,000. Is it also in the LCAP, or did it get moved over into here?
So what we did was,
so there's some things that's
right. And
yeah.
each one probably has its own story. But for Bridge, what we did was we kept Bridge at its current, the funding it's always been at in the LCAP or the supplemental grant. And then we are increasing expenditures on Bridge, and we put that in ELO. And then Pauline is also, our Director Fallonsby is also putting it into the general fund for the following 2 years.
Okay, so you did that kind of maneuvering to try
yeah, we're doing a lot of playing with budgets.
And could you answer the question on whether there's summer school opportunities for Berkeley High?
I know that we increased them. I'm going to say that I'm not as familiar with all the programs in Berkeley High. We're providing more Bridge at Berkeley High and some of our other programs too. And I don't know if Dr. Stevens can support me on this.
Yeah, I think that it's a limited expansion beyond the 2 sort of typical high school programs. So one is credit recovery. That's for students who need to make up classes. And the other is our special education extended school year program. So those are the 2 largest high school programs. Other programs that are taking place are much, much smaller. I think that there's a small sort of step-up program being contemplated right now, but they're relatively limited. And some of that, as Director Sinclair was saying, is because of sort of a lack of staff volunteers this summer. We really are struggling to find folks who want to work.
Okay, so the reason we don't have summer opportunities for 9th and 10th graders is because we couldn't find teachers to teach it. Are we searching? How are we at? I mean, there's a lot, we've heard a lot from high school students themselves, as well as their families, that learning loss doesn't just happen in the younger grades. The impact of the pandemic, along with extended, the learning loss, the socialization, the social emotional support. So I'm a little concerned that we have not dedicated money to Berkeley High outside of basically what we normally do. I think it's a third of our population. So I'm not sure why we did that. And if there's any way to remedy it or to look at alternatives for it.
I may not have all the information I need to answer that question. I can go back and speak with Principal Ragosa about some of the additional summer programming that's taking place this summer.
I do know we get copied on some of the emails, and I've gotten some emails to staff trying to recruit for the summer, and sort of pointing out that we're low on staff and the fund, the pay that's available. So at least I know I've been privy to at least some of the efforts to try to get staff for these programs, for the summer programs. Okay, Director Vasudev, and then Vice President Brown.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Director Sinclair, for your hard work with this plan. My question is about the consultant. I see there's a line item for a consultant to help with summer planning. Is that for the public schools fund?
Our consultant comes through the public schools fund, but we are paying separately for that position. We have normally, we keep our program to a smaller program normally for summer school. And so because we wanted to expand it and we wanted to create brochures, etc., we did hire somebody to support us. And she's been doing a great job doing that. And, that's where she's reached out to build the catalog and also to get some of those other programs in place. And I mean, we really just didn't have the staffing before to plan a robust summer school.
So is the idea that that person's also going to help for next year, and we'll be able to use some of the same, maybe the vendors will change, but some of the same resources for the planning this year? Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly the intention.
Got it. And then I have a question about the English language tutoring program. I think in one of the original proposals, it was like the grades were limited, and I like that it's K to 12, or that it expands all the grade levels. How are we planning to recruit students for that? The tutoring program.
We haven't planned that fully out, but I'll tell you that we've used the Bay Area Writing Project to provide some after what we normally use them in the summer. And this year we were able to have them provide some intervention services, or it's not intervention, it's actually just extra writing support for our EL students in middle school. And so we're hoping, that's a proposal, and we're hoping to be able to expand that a little bit.
Got it. And so I know that at the high school level, back to what Director Sinai was saying, at the high school level, there's a big need for those students that are waiting, long-term English language learners that are waiting to be reclassified. So my hope is that we could use some of this funding to help them too, right? Like some of the older students that have yet to be reclassified.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And then for Bridge, my last question is, for Bridge, is any of this going to the program other than staffing? Like, what's the funding going to? Is any of it going to like field trips, or to being able to support the students directly?
The request we had for Bridge was to maintain the program basically by providing extra staffing, an extra 0.1 for each teacher, because they do see a very large caseload in comparison to other programs. And so we wanted to fund it so that it can sustain, basically. And so that's what that funding's about. I know we talk about extra funding, and that's not part of this plan that we put in place here.
Okay.
That answers your question. So it will help them. They do get grant money also. And that is my understanding is the grant money pays for field trips, et cetera, et cetera. So this is basically just to support the staffing for the program.
Yeah, I guess I'm just concerned. I agree that it's good to support the staffing for Bridge, but I'm just kind of concerned that as the students have come out and advocated for the program, that I also want to make sure that that we're student focused and that they're getting something too, and that we're looking, if we're increasing cohorts or if the additional staffing, what's been represented to the public at these DLAC meetings, in our public meetings, is that The additional staffing will allow more students to be served. And if that's the case, then that's great. But, how are we serving those students? And if they need additional resources, I'd like that to be reflected somewhere, or at least, have an idea where that funding could come from.
Vice President Brown.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, for your presentation. And kind of on the heels of Director Vasudev's comment, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about ABSB 86 in terms of the $1,000 allocate, or the allocation for $1,000 per homeless student. And in looking at the extended learning grant, seven-pager that you put together, I am noticing that it is a lot. It is very pretty staff heavy. And so I wanted to take some time to talk about from the $221,000 that are supposed to be allocated for homeless youth. $96,000, I think, is the line item for the actual homeless student funding. Can you talk about what those services are and how they are set to support our students with the $96,000 allocation?
Yeah, I can, or I don't know if Dr. Stevens, if you want to say anything about this, but we do fund besides the position. So we have the Hope Counselor, but in addition, we supply, sometimes it's food, sometimes it's internet service, sometimes it's very specialized according to family needs. I can't give you a line item of exactly what it is, but I do know through the budget that we had in the supplemental funds that it went to items that supported homeless families.
And this is to address what we've already done, not to address what we plan to do in the future. The $96,000 is just, okay.
Yeah, as you know, we had to cut our supplemental grant. And so we did use some of this money to make up for some of our supplemental grant cuts.
Okay. And then is the counselor position that you mentioned different from the McKinley-Vento counselor position?
No, it's the same thing. And it's
Oh,
sometimes called the Hope Counselor.
Okay. So it's the same thing, and that has its own line item outside of the $96,000 one, right?
Yes.
Director Sinai, oh, sorry, Vice President Brown, were you done? Okay, Director Sinai. Oh, no, sorry, Director Babbitt. Director Babbitt, sorry, you go. And then Director Vesido.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge that we can think about learning loss differently than just summer school. For example, it really was the loss of a lot of instructional minutes throughout the year. So if we're talking about math, right, maybe it's the concentrated tutoring someone needs just to be better prepared for school in the fall when we go back to the 5 full days a week. And so how can we think about, if it's not a formal program, but it is, say, a tutoring program through maybe Classroom Matters or UC Berkeley students who can engage, 10 or 15 kids, maybe that's too big, maybe it's 5 to 7 kids or whatever throughout the day, and just fine tuning skills that they may have missed in math and English language arts and writing. I think that may help us address learning loss without being able to have a formal credentialed summer school program, in the sense where, I'm taking math A or math B or, for summer school for credit recovery, but actually I'm just improving my skill set so that I'm better prepared for the fall. And I'm not quite sure if that's how we're also thinking about it in this plan, but I would like to offer that as a recommendation to meet our kids' needs. And then finally, are we taking a poll from parents to find out or students to find out where are the areas of concentration they feel they need support from the pandemic and learning loss so that they can function better in the fall?
Yeah, I want to add one thing about summer school. We did, so normally we would over the year collect fees from families. And we didn't get those fees this year. So this money is helping us to make up some of that money that was lost. Otherwise, we might not be able to provide a summer program, which I think was partially part of the intention of the funds too. So that's why you do see the summer school in there. It also, is the intention of the funding. But I agree with you. And there are different funds that we are using for those, like, for example, the STEM steps we did this year, we used a different funding source for that. And so that's still, because it's not in here, doesn't mean it's off the table.
Okay, let's have a couple more brief questions. I think Director Vasudev is next.
This is as a point of clarity, Director Sinclair, when we say community learning hub funding, that's summer school funding, is that correct?
No, that was the funding that we used to run the hubs that were operated out of the 3 sites during the school year.
I got it.
The Ed Camp.
Yeah, it was called a lot of different things. So.
Okay, I just wanted to know what it, thank you.
Vice President Brown, then Director Sane. No, sorry, Director Sane, last question for you.
So I'm going to go back to the high school question, because I agree with Director Babbitt that not everything has to be a credentialed teacher, which is why I'm going to push a little bit on possibly doing alternatives at the high school that don't require a credentialed teacher, similar to I forget what they call them, but the Sunday math groups that they used to do at Sports Basement. It was skilled parents, who ran that. And I see that there's a math academy for the middle school. I'd love to see some math academies for the high school where there's desperate need for math support. And it doesn't have to be run by a credentialed teacher. So again, we've done a few things, and I think it's included in this budget, where we are contracting with other programs. So whether it's Classroom Matters, we buy spots for tutoring, or whether it's some other organization, understanding that the line items have some flexibility. I'd like us to step back and see whether there can't be more opportunities for our high school students to get some enrichment and academic support over the summer months.
Okay, Vice President Brown.
Yes, I just wanted to add to what Director Sinai was saying, and I want to echo what she was saying, and also encourage us to look at other school districts and their credit recovery plans over the summer, and what they're doing and who they're deciding to partner with, and maybe taking a page out of their book. If we are saying that we're having trouble finding volunteers, then we should definitely try to look at what other districts are doing in case they are in the same boat. And I have a couple, either Michelle or Brent, if you would like to connect afterwards, that I can offer.
Great.
Yeah, we'd welcome that. Thank you.
All right, Director Sinai, is there anything you'd like to say before we vote?
Yes, I realized when I was going back through the spreadsheet that Kids Village, which is a lifelong program where I work, is on the spreadsheet. And while we're not approving the exact dollar amounts, I'm thinking probably I need to recuse from approving the plan if it includes the possibility of funding. I texted President Alper and we kind of concluded that I should probably just recuse.
Okay.
Even though it's not technically the contract.
Yeah, thank you, Director Sinai. So I'm going to move to approve the plan to be submitted to the state.
I second.
Second by Director Vasudev. Ms. Charas, are you there?
Yes.
Can you call the roll?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Director Vasudev,
Yes.
Director Babbitt,
Yes.
Director Sinai,
She's accusing herself.
Vice recused.
Yeah.
Okay. Vice President Brown
Yes.
and President Alper.
Yes. All right. Thank you all. And Director Sinclair, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate all of you for coming tonight. And we will be back at it tomorrow. So we'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you. Have a good night. Take care.